The clinking of delicate crystal and the soft murmur of polite conversation were the usual sounds in Dominic Terranova's world. He was sitting in a dimly lit corner of a diner that he secretly owned. To his guests, he was simply a wealthy businessman. But to the men sitting with him and the large bodyguard named Rocco standing behind his chair, he was Dom, the boss. His dark eyes, cold and calculating, scanned the room, missing absolutely nothing. This was supposed to be a simple meeting, but the numbers just weren't adding up. Someone was stealing from his legitimate coffee shop chain, Pareto Sorso, and the disrespect was a burning poison in his gut. He was beyond annoyed, his patience as fragile as the restaurant's exquisite china. A waitress approached their table, her steps a little hesitant. She was new. Dominic could always tell. Her name was Leah, according to the small tag on her uniform. She had warm, brown eyes and a quiet, focused demeanor as she carefully placed their water glasses on the table. As she reached for his glass, her elbow barely brushed against his fork, causing it to emit a soft, metallic ping against the plate. It was nothing, a tiny, insignificant mistake. But to Dominic, in his foul mood, it was a sign of incompetence. He didn't even glance at her. Instead, he leaned slightly toward Rocco, a cruel, lazy smile playing on his lips, and whispered in smooth, rapid Italian, "Che ragazza stupida. Come un elefante in un negozio di cristalli." What a clumsy, stupid girl. She's like an elephant in a crystal shop. He expected Rocco's quiet chuckle. He did not expect the voice that answered. Leah didn't look up from her notepad. Her pen kept moving, but her voice, clear and fluent with a perfect Roman accent, cut through the air. Si misura il valore di una persona per come tratta non può fare nulla per lui. A man's true worth is shown by how he treats those who can do nothing for him. The silence at the table was absolute. Dominic felt as if the air had been sucked right out of his lungs. His own words, meant to be a private insult, had been caught, understood, and thrown back at him with the sharpness of a razor. He slowly, very slowly, lifted his gaze to meet hers. For the first time, she looked directly at him. There was no fear in her eyes. There was fire and intelligence and a deep, simmering pride that should not belong to a simple waitress. She held his stare for a heartbeat longer than was safe, then smoothly asked, "Are you ready to order, sir?" She took their order without a single mistake, her movements now sure and graceful. For the rest of the evening, Dominic couldn't concentrate. His eyes followed her as she moved between the tables. The insult he had spoken now felt like a stain on his own character. He, Dominic Terranova, had been publicly shamed and by a waitress. But it wasn't anger he felt most strongly. It was a burning, undeniable curiosity. The image of Leah's fiery eyes haunted him for 3 days. A normal person would have let it go. Dominic Terranova was not a normal person. He had to know. A few quiet commands to his men, and he had her address. A small, plain apartment building on the other side of the city. He went alone, a rule he almost never broke. But something told him that showing up with Rocco would shatter whatever this was. He stood outside her door, took a breath he didn't really need, and knocked. When Leah opened the door, her eyes widened in shock, then narrowed with suspicion. She held a textbook in one hand, and he could see more books scattered on her small kitchen table. "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice tight. She didn't open the door wider. A clear message that he wasn't welcome. "I owe you an apology," Dominic said, his voice softer than he intended. "My behavior at the restaurant was unacceptable." Leah just stared, waiting for the real reason. "I did some asking around," he continued, glancing past her at the modest apartment. "You're studying business, top of your class, and you're working at Bellinate to pay your tuition. So?" she challenged, her guard firmly up. "So I have a business proposal for you. A job." This caught her off guard. "A job? Doing what? Waiting tables for you somewhere else?" "No," he said, finally smiling a little. "Managing my Pareto Sorso coffee shops. I think someone on my team is stealing from me. I need someone from the outside, someone smart, someone honest, who isn't afraid to speak their mind." Leah laughed. A short, disbelieving sound. You want me to be your spy? I want you to be my manager. The salary is 5 times what you make now. You can quit your other jobs, focus on your studies, and get real-world experience. He saw the conflict in her eyes. The suspicion was a wall, but the opportunity was a key. She was trapped in a life of constant struggle, and he was offering her a ladder out. It was a dangerous ladder, she knew that, but the chance to use her mind, to prove herself, to escape the endless cycle of bills and textbooks, it was a powerful lure. Why me? She finally asked, her voice a whisper. Because, Dominic said, his intense eyes locking with hers. Anyone who can put me in my place in perfect Italian is someone I want on my side. After a long pause, Leah nodded slowly. Okay, she said. I'll do it. The first week at Pareto Sorso was a whirlwind. Leah was a natural. She understood the numbers, the inventory flow, the tiny discrepancies that others missed. She wasn't intimidated by the gruff managers or the suspicious looks from Dominic's men. She did her job with a quiet, fierce efficiency that Dominic found himself admiring more each day. Their interactions started as brief meetings in his office. He'd ask for an update. She'd give him a clear, concise report. But soon the meetings lasted longer. They'd talk about business theories, her ideas for the shops, his vision. The tense spark from their first meeting began to smolder into something else. A shared look across a conference table would last a moment too long. His hand would brush against hers as he passed her a file, and a jolt of electricity would pass between them. They were a boss and his employee, a mafia king and a waitress. Yet in those quiet moments they were just Dom and Leah, 2 sharp minds circling each other, drawn together by a force neither understood. Then she found it, buried in the false invoices and the shifted stock numbers. She found the pattern. It wasn't messy or hidden in a complicated way. It was clean, precise, which meant the thief was someone with high-level access, someone who knew the system inside and out. Her blood ran cold when she traced the digital fingerprint back to its source. Frankie Terranova, Dominic's right-hand man, his own cousin. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Telling him could get her killed. Frankie was family. She was an outsider. But not telling him would be a betrayal of the trust Dominic had placed in her. A trust that had come to mean everything. Gathering her courage and the printed evidence, she walked into Dominic's private study at the back of a coffee roastery. He was alone. Dom, she said, her voice steady despite her fear. I found him. She laid the papers on his desk. Dominic's expression darkened as he read, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the edge of the wood. The fury in the room was a living thing. But when he looked up at her, his eyes were not angry with her. They were filled with a grim gratitude. Stay here, he commanded, his voice dangerously low. He summoned Rocco and gave a quiet order. Minutes later, Frankie strolled into the study, his usual friendly smile on his face. You wanted to see me, Cugino? Frankie asked. Dominic didn't speak. He simply picked up the papers and threw them onto the floor in front of his cousin. Frankie's smile faded as he looked down at the evidence of his betrayal. He looked from the papers to Dominic's furious face, and then, strangely, his eyes landed on Leah, and he smiled. It wasn't a smile of fear or guilt. It was a smile of triumph. You found the little thief, Frankie said, his voice dripping with false sweetness. Good for you. But you brought the big one right into your home. You gave her a job. You let her get close. Did you really think it was a coincidence, that girl in that restaurant? Dominic went very still. What are you talking about? Frankie pointed a dramatic finger at Leah. Her name isn't Leah Esposito. Her birth name is Lucia Luciano. The name Luciano hit Dominic like a physical blow. His face lost all its color. Every person in their world knew that name. Antonio Luciano was the previous boss, the man Dominic's father had overthrown in a bloody war. Her father is the man your father killed. Frankie hissed, his voice rising with gleeful malice. She didn't come here for a job, Dominic. She came for revenge. She's been playing you this entire time. Dominic turned his head, his movements slow and heavy, to look at Leah. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. The woman he had started to trust, the woman he had started to feel something for. The betrayal was so deep, so profound. It felt like his heart had been ripped from his chest. He stared at her, his eyes shattered, waiting for her to deny it. The silence in the study was heavier than any Dominic had ever known. It was broken by the sharp click of Rocco drawing his gun, aiming it at Leah's heart. Frankie's smug smile was a slash of victory in the tense room. All Dominic could see was Leah. Leah, who stood perfectly still, her face pale, but her chin held high, her eyes locked on his, filled not with guilt, but with a desperate, terrifying truth. "Wait!" Dominic commanded, his voice a low growl. He never took his eyes off her. "Is it true? Are you Lucia Luciano?" She took a shaky breath. "Yes." The admission felt like a final crushing blow, but she continued, her voice gaining strength. "My name was Lucia, but my mother, Celia, changed it to Leah Esposito the night she ran away with me. She told me we were running from the monsters who killed my father. She told me the Terranovas were evil." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I grew up hiding, moving from place to place. She died 6 months ago. Before she did, she told me one last secret. She said the only thing she managed to save wasn't money or jewels. It was a key. She hid it in the one place she knew the Terranova business touched, the main Pareto Sorso office building. It opens a safety deposit box with her real will." Frankie snorted. "A pathetic story." "Why?" Dominic asked, ignoring his cousin. His heart was a drumbeat of war inside his chest. "Why come here? Why now?" "The will," Leah whispered. She said it contained the truth. "Not just about our family, but about everything. I didn't want revenge, Dominic. I just wanted the truth. I got the job at the restaurant to get access to the office. I took your job for the same reason. I never thought you'd be." She trailed off, her meaning hanging in the air between them. "I never thought you'd be kind. I never thought I'd fall for you." Dominic sent everyone away. A furious Frankie, a confused Rocco. He was alone with the daughter of his father's greatest enemy. The old rules, the laws his father had hammered into him, screamed one thing: eliminate the threat. A Luciano could not be allowed to live. It was the foundation his world was built on. But the man he had become, the man who had looked into Leah's fiery eyes and seen a partner, screamed something else. He paced his office for hours, the ghost of his father's legacy warring with the living, breathing, feeling Leah had ignited in him. She hadn't tried to run. She had stood her ground and told him a story that felt truer than any history he'd been taught. Her mother had run to save her, not to plot revenge. As the sun began to rise, casting long shadows across the room, he made his choice. It was the most dangerous decision of his life. He was choosing a possibility, the possibility of her, over the certainty of his family's code. He drove to her apartment himself. When she opened the door, her eyes were red and puffy from crying, filled with a fear that made his chest ache. "I believe you," he said. The 3 words were simple, but their weight was immense. The relief that washed over her face was so profound it staggered him. She swayed on her feet, and he caught her, his hands on her arms. The touch was electric, a current of forgiveness and newfound trust. "We're going to find that key," he said, his voice firm. Together, the search was a silent, intimate dance through the dusty back rooms and old filing cabinets of the Pareto Sorso headquarters after hours. They worked side by side, their shoulders brushing, the air thick with unspoken words and the thrill of shared danger. It was in a hollowed-out space behind a loose baseboard in his father's old, abandoned office that she finally found it. A small, tarnished brass key on a thin chain. She held it up, her hand trembling. Dominic moved closer, his body shielding hers from the empty room. He didn't reach for the key. He reached for her, his fingers gently tilting her chin up so her eyes met his. "Whatever that box holds," he vowed, "we face it together." And then he kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision of all their fear, their secrets, their shattered trust, and the desperate hope they were placing in each other. It was passion forged in fire, a claiming and a surrender all at once. It was the final burning bridge between their pasts and a future they were now choosing to steal for themselves. The bank was cold and quiet. The safety deposit box was long and metal, sitting heavily on the table between them. With a final shared look, Leah slid the key into the lock, turned with a smooth, decisive click. Inside, there were no stacks of money, no glittering jewels. There was a single, thick envelope yellowed with age. Leah's hands shook as she opened it. She unfolded the pages, her eyes scanning her mother's elegant handwriting. Dominic watched her face, seeing confusion, then dawning horror, then a sharp, blazing anger. "What is it?" he asked, his voice tight. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with the magnitude of the revelation. "It's all been a lie," she breathed. "My whole life? Your whole life?" She handed him the letter. It was from her mother, Celia Luciano, written the night she fled. "My dearest Lucia, if you are reading this, you are brave and you have learned the name I tried to erase. I have lied to you to keep you safe, but you deserve the truth. Your father, Antonio, was not killed by Don Terranova." Dominic's breath caught in his throat. He read on, his heart pounding. They were friends. They wanted to make peace, to end the old wars. But a third family, the Rossis, feared their alliance. Salvatore Rossi, a snake who smiled to their faces, orchestrated it all. He had his men ambush them, making it look like Don Terranova had betrayed your father. He started the war that made him powerful. He is the monster. I ran from him, my love. I let the world believe the Terranovas were the villains because it was the only way to hide you from the real one. The world tilted. Sal Rossi, the man who had patted Dominic on the back after his father's funeral, the man who had given him advice, who had been in this very bank building the day he met Leah, lamenting about the missing funds over espresso. "You need a fresh pair of eyes, kid," Sal had said. Someone from the outside. A cold, sickening understanding washed over Dominic. Sal had known about Leah. He had known exactly who she was. He had manipulated them both, placing the lost Luciano heir right under Dominic's nose, knowing her discovery would either destroy Dominic or cause a war that would weaken him enough for Sal to take over everything. Their meeting wasn't fate. Their attraction wasn't a coincidence. It was all a carefully laid trap by the real enemy, an enemy who had been smiling at them both all along. The game had just changed completely, and the danger was closer than either of them could have ever imagined. The truth about Sal Rossi was a bomb that had already gone off, leaving their world in silent, dangerous rubble. Dominic and Leah stood in the bank vault, the letter feeling like a live wire in his hands. The enemy wasn't a rival across the city. He was a ghost in their own house, a man Dominic had called family. "We can't let him know we know," Dominic said, his voice low and urgent. "If he suspects, he'll strike fast, and we'll lose any advantage." Leah nodded, her mind already working alongside his. "So we give him the show he expects. He thinks you're heartbroken, and I'm a vengeful traitor. Let's act like it." The performance began immediately. The next day at the Pareto Sorso office, Dominic staged a furious, very public argument with her, his voice echoing through the halls as he accused her of being a Luciano spy. Leah, with tears in her eyes that were only partly an act, was escorted from the building by Rocco. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, walking away from him, feeling his angry glare on her back, knowing it was all a lie, but feeling the sting of it anyway. In secret, their trust became their greatest weapon. They met in the quiet back room of a library, their heads bent close together over building blueprints. They communicated through coded messages left in coffee orders. Their love, forged in betrayal and now tested by fire, became an unbreakable bond. They were no longer just a man and a woman in love. They were partners in a war. Their whispered plans in the dark were a stark contrast to their cold silence in the light. Every touch, every secret kiss stolen in the shadows, was a promise of the future they were fighting for. Just as they predicted, Sal Rossi made his move. Believing Dominic was weakened by the betrayal and the family was in chaos, Sal called a meeting of all the major families. He stood at the head of the long table in the old wood-paneled meeting hall, a look of fake concern on his face. "Dominic is a good boy," Sal announced to the gathered bosses. "But he is young. His judgment is clouded by a pretty face. He led a Luciano into his bed, into his business. He can no longer lead. For the good of all our families, I must step in." The doors to the hall burst open. But it wasn't Sal's men. Dominic walked in, his posture radiating a cool, controlled power, and by his side, her hand firmly clasped in his, was Leah. The room erupted in murmurs. Sal's face went slack with shock. "Dom, what is this? Has this witch blinded you completely?" "The only one who has been blind is me, Sal," Dominic said, his voice cutting through the noise. "Blind to the snake my father called a friend." He held up the aged letter. "This is from Celia Luciano. It states that Salvatore Rossi is the one who murdered Antonio Luciano and my father, framing them both to start a war and seize power for himself." Chaos exploded. Sal roared, "Lies!" And in the same moment, one of his hidden men drew a gun, aiming directly at Dominic's heart. Time seemed to slow, but Leah was already moving. A memory, a lesson from her mother a lifetime ago. If a man points a gun, Lucia, you move here, and you twist like this, flashed through her mind. She didn't think. She acted. She lunged, her body a blur, grabbing the man's wrist and twisting it with a sharp, precise motion she didn't know she still possessed. The gun clattered to the floor, and the room descended into a full-blown brawl. Dominic, seeing what she had done, felt a surge of awe and ferocity. He fought his way to her side, and together they became an unstoppable team, protecting each other's backs until the last of Sal's loyalists was subdued. With Sal Rossi captured and his conspiracy revealed, a new peace settled over the families. Dominic was no longer just a boss who commanded fear. He was a leader who had uncovered a great evil and earned immense respect. The Terranova name was stronger than ever. Everyone expected him to take his throne with Leah as his queen. But Dominic had a different plan. He gathered everyone in the same hall where they had faced Sal. "I have led this family as my father wished," he announced, his voice clear and strong. "But that life ends now." He turned to Leah, his eyes filled with nothing but love and certainty. Then, to the gasps of the entire room, he got down on one knee. "Leah," he said, "the best thing that ever happened to me was the day I was stupid enough to insult you. You showed me that my worth wasn't in my power, but in my heart. I don't want to be a mafia boss. I want to be your husband. I want to build a real, honest life with you growing old." Tears streamed down Leah's face, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said, her voice ringing through the silent hall. 1,000 times, yes. Then a small, knowing smile touched her lips. "But we build it as true partners." She looked from Dominic to the stunned faces of the families. "My mother didn't just leave me a letter. She left me the entire Luciano fortune, hidden in Switzerland for decades. It's more money than any of you have ever seen." The final stunning plot twist settled over the room. The poor waitress was, in fact, an heiress. She had never needed Dominic's money or his power. She looked back at Dominic, her love for him shining in her eyes. "So let's use it. Let's use my name and your name to build something that is just ours. No more Terranova. No more Luciano. Just us." And so they did. They walked away from the world of violence and secrets, hand in hand, two equals in love and in life. They turned Pareto Sorso into a global empire, a symbol of what can happen when two broken pasts come together to create a perfect future. Their story became a legend, not a fairy tale, but a testament to the power of love, forgiveness, and the courage to choose your own destiny. Fear, no, but a love so incredibly powerful it actually brought an end to a war and then went on to construct an entirely new world order. We sincerely hope you were absolutely riveted, hanging on every word right up until the very last second. The saga of Dominic and Leah was truly a wild ride, a complete roller coaster of concealed truths, hard-won trust, and, ultimately, an all-encompassing, profound love. If this particular story managed to capture your heart and leave you wanting more, then be sure to subscribe to our channel for a steady stream of equally dramatic and twist-filled tales just like this one. We absolutely love to hear from all of you. So please, drop us a line in the comments section and tell us where in the world you're watching from. And also let us know your thoughts and feelings about Lee's final, earth-shattering secret. Was that the ending that you were anticipating and hoping for? Thank you, from the bottom of our hearts, for watching and sharing this journey with us.